Jerry, a small 7-year-old boy with big worried eyes, burst through the heavy doors of the police station, his heart pounding in his chest. His small legs had carried him all the way there as fast as they could, and now he stood in the middle of the room, gasping for breath. Every officer in the room turned to look at him, startled by his sudden entrance. "Arrest my dad," Jerry cried out, his voice trembling but loud enough to echo in the quiet room. The words seemed to hang in the air, freezing everyone in place. The officers stared at him, shocked and confused by the unexpected request. This wasn't something they heard every day, especially not from such a young child. One of the officers, a kind-looking man with a gentle smile, stepped forward and knelt down to Jerry's level. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly, trying to soothe the clearly distressed boy. "What's your name? And why do you want us to arrest your dad?" Jerry looked at the officer with wide, tear-filled eyes. He was scared, but also determined. "My name is Jerry," he said, his voice shaky but clear. "Please, you have to arrest him." The officer furrowed his brow, even more puzzled now. Arresting someone was serious business, and it was even more serious if a child was asking for it. He didn't understand why a little boy like Jerry would want something like that. "Why, Jerry?" the officer asked gently. "Why do you want us to arrest your dad? Did something happen?" Jerry's small hands clenched into fists at his sides as he tried to find the right words. He felt so desperate, so scared, but he also felt a strange kind of hope. A hope that this was the only way to help his dad. His mind flashed back to what he had seen on TV, about how people in prison got food and were taken care of. That's all he wanted for his dad, to make sure they wouldn't be hungry anymore. "Please," Jerry begged, his voice breaking with emotion. "We don't have any food. I saw on TV that people in jail get food. I just want my dad to eat. Please help us." The officer's heart sank as he listened to Jerry's explanation. The room, which had been filled with confusion moments before, now grew heavy with the weight of what the boy had said. The officers exchanged looks of deep concern, realizing that this was not just a simple misunderstanding. This was a cry for help from a child who didn't know where else to turn. The officer who had spoken to Jerry put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Okay, Jerry," he said softly, trying to keep his own voice steady. "We're going to figure this out. You're not alone, okay? We're going to help you and your dad." Jerry nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks, feeling a tiny bit of relief for the first time. He had done the only thing he could think of to help his dad, and now maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. As Jerry stood in the police station, wiping away his tears, the officer gently asked him more questions, trying to understand what was going on. The kind officer who had spoken to him first sat down beside him on a bench, keeping his voice soft and calm. "Jerry, can you tell us why you want your dad to be arrested?" The officer asked carefully, not wanting to upset him further. "Did something bad happen at home?" Jerry shook his head quickly, his little hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "No, nothing bad happened," he said, his voice small but firm. "It's just, I saw on TV that people in prison get food every day. They get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they have a bed to sleep in." The officer listened intently, trying to piece together what Jerry was saying. The boy continued, his innocent logic making perfect sense in his young mind. "We don't have enough food at home," Jerry explained, his eyes filling with tears again. "Sometimes my dad says he's not hungry, but I know he is. He just wants me to eat more. I thought, if he went to prison, they would give him food, and he wouldn't have to be hungry anymore. They would take care of him." The room grew even quieter as Jerry's words sank in. The officers exchanged looks of deep concern, their hearts heavy with the realization of what this little boy had been going through. This wasn't about a crime or punishment. This was about a child's desperate attempt to make sure his dad was fed, to find a way out of the hunger they faced every day. The officer beside Jerry felt a lump form in his throat. He had seen a lot in his time on the force, but nothing had ever hit him quite like this. He could see now that Jerry wasn't just scared. He was trying to save his father in the only way he knew how. "Jerry," the officer said gently, his voice thick with emotion, "you don't need to worry about your dad going to prison. There are other ways we can help. We're going to make sure you and your dad have food and a place to sleep. You don't have to do this alone." Jerry looked up at the officer with a mix of hope and confusion. "You mean, you can help us without my dad going to prison?" he asked, his voice trembling with the weight of what he had been carrying. "Yes, Jerry," the officer reassured him, giving his shoulder a comforting squeeze. "We're going to help you. We're going to make sure you and your dad are okay." As the realization of Jerry's situation fully hit the officers, they knew they had to act fast. This was no ordinary case. This was a cry for help from a child who just wanted to take care of his father. The gravity of what they had just learned weighed heavily on them, and they silently vowed to do everything they could to make things right for Jerry and his dad. The police chief, deeply moved by Jerry's innocent plea and the heartbreaking logic behind it, knew they had to see for themselves what was really going on at the boy's home. He gathered a few officers, including the one who had been speaking with Jerry, and gently asked the boy to show them where he lived. Jerry nodded, and still holding the officer's hand, led them through the streets to his apartment. As they walked, the officers noticed how quiet Jerry was, his little shoulders slumped under the weight of a burden no child should have to carry. When they arrived at Jerry's building, the officers saw that it was old and in need of repair. The paint was peeling, and the stairs creaked under their feet as they climbed to the small apartment Jerry called home. He unlocked the door with a key that seemed too big for his tiny hand, and pushed it open, revealing the inside. The officers stepped inside, and what they saw broke their hearts. The apartment was bare, with only the most basic furniture. There was a small worn-out couch, a table with a few mismatched chairs, and a tiny kitchen with empty cupboards. The refrigerator hung quietly in the corner, but when the police chief opened it, he found it nearly empty. Just a few scraps of food that wouldn't be enough to sustain anyone for long. Jerry's father, Mr. Thompson, was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, looking tired and defeated. When he saw the police officers, his eyes widened in alarm, but Jerry ran to him, wrapping his arms around his waist. "Dad, I brought them here to help us," Jerry said, his voice small but filled with hope. Mr. Thompson looked from his son to the officers, his face etched with worry and shame. The police chief could see that this man had been doing everything he could to take care of his son, but the weight of poverty had clearly taken its toll. As they looked around the apartment, the officers noticed the signs of struggle everywhere. The walls were bare, the blankets on the beds were thin and worn, and there were no toys or books for Jerry to play with. It was clear that every penny Mr. Thompson earned went toward keeping the roof over their heads and trying to put food on the table, but it wasn't enough. The police chief felt a deep sadness settle in his chest. This was the harsh reality that Jerry and his father were living in every day, a reality that had driven a little boy to believe that the only way to help his father was to have him arrested. "We're going to help you," the police chief said, his voice filled with determination as he turned to Mr. Thompson. "You don't have to go through this alone. We'll make sure you and Jerry have what you need." Mr. Thompson, overwhelmed with emotion, could only nod as tears filled his eyes. Jerry looked up at the officers, a small smile of hope starting to form on his face. For the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe, just maybe, things would get better. The officers, now fully understanding the gravity of the situation, knew that they had to act quickly. They couldn't walk away from this. They had to make sure that Jerry and his father would never have to worry about going hungry again. The visit had confirmed their worst fears, but it had also strengthened their resolve to bring some light into the darkness that had overshadowed this little family's life. News of Jerry's story spread like wildfire through the small community. The officers who had visited his home couldn't keep the heartbreaking situation to themselves. They shared what they had seen with their families, friends, and neighbors, and soon, everyone was talking about the little boy who had walked into the police station, begging them to arrest his dad just so they could have food to eat. The community was shocked and deeply moved by Jerry's story. People who had never met him felt a tug at their hearts and a strong desire to help. The thought of a child having to make such a desperate plea stirred something in everyone, and they knew they couldn't stand by and do nothing. Within days, the entire community had rallied together. Neighbors who lived in the same building as Jerry and his dad started gathering food and clothes. Local businesses chipped in too. Grocery stores donated fresh produce, bakeries sent over bread and pastries, and even the small diner down the street offered free meals. Charities and local organizations quickly got involved, providing medical care and helping to repair the apartment where Jerry and his dad lived. They brought in new furniture, warm blankets, and even some toys and books for Jerry, making sure that their home was not just a place to live, but a place where they could truly thrive. The police officers who had first heard Jerry's plea worked tirelessly alongside the community. They organized food drives, helped deliver donations, and made sure that Jerry and his dad were receiving everything they needed. Every day, more and more people showed up to lend a hand, and the outpouring of support grew bigger than anyone had expected. Jerry watched in awe as his small, run-down apartment was transformed into a warm, welcoming home. He couldn't believe how many people cared. People he had never met before were now like friends, bringing them food, clothes, and even stopping by just to check in. His father, Mr. Thompson, was overwhelmed with gratitude. He had always tried to provide for his son on his own, but now he realized that they didn't have to struggle alone. The kindness of their neighbors and the generosity of strangers showed him that they were part of a community that truly cared. As the days passed, the once dire situation began to improve drastically. Jerry and his father no longer had to worry about where their next meal would come from. They had food on the table, clothes on their backs, and a warm place to sleep at night. The police chief, who had first responded to Jerry's plea, watched in amazement as the community came together to help this little family. What had started as a heartbreaking situation had turned into a powerful example of what people could do when they joined forces for a common cause. The strength of the community's response surprised everyone, even Jerry. He had never imagined that so many people would care about him and his dad, but now he could see that they weren't alone. The love and support of the community had lifted them up, giving them hope and a fresh start. Jerry felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that things would be okay now, not just because of the food and clothes, but because of the kindness and love that surrounded them. He had seen firsthand the power of people coming together, and it was a feeling he would carry with him forever. As the days turned into weeks, the transformation in Jerry and his father's lives became more and more evident. The community's support didn't just stop with food and clothes, it blossomed into something much bigger. Thanks to the connections made through the community's outreach, Jerry's father, Mr. Thompson, was offered a stable job with decent pay. It was a position that allowed him to provide for his family without the constant fear of not having enough. With this new job came a sense of dignity and hope that had been missing for so long. The generosity of the community also extended to finding Jerry and his father a new place to live. They moved out of the small, run-down apartment and into a cozy, well-kept home in a friendly neighborhood. The new house was filled with warmth and security, a stark contrast to the uncertainty they had known before. Jerry now had his own room, filled with books, toys, and a bed that felt like a cloud. For the first time in a long time, both he and his father could rest easy, knowing that tomorrow would be a better day. The story closes with a heartwarming scene. Jerry and his father sitting down to dinner at their new home. The table was covered with a variety of delicious food, all of it a reminder of the love and support they had received. As they sat together, sharing a meal in their safe, comfortable home, Jerry's eyes shone with happiness. His father looked at him with a smile, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for how far they had come. Jerry's innocent plea had sparked a change that no one had expected. What had started as a desperate cry for help had turned into a movement that brought an entire community closer together. People who had once been strangers now looked out for one another, more aware of the struggles that others might be facing in silence. The impact of Jerry's story reached far beyond just his own home. It became a symbol of what could happen when people came together to help those in need. The community had learned a valuable lesson, that sometimes it takes the innocent wisdom of the child to remind us of our shared humanity. As the story concludes, the reader is left with a feeling of fulfillment, knowing that the community's actions have not only transformed Jerry and his father's lives, but have also made the neighborhood a better place for everyone. Jerry's story serves as a lasting reminder of the power of kindness, empathy, and collective action. It encourages readers to look around and ask themselves how they might be able to help others, just as this community did. In the end, Jerry's simple wish to take care of his dad had led to something extraordinary, a new beginning for his family and a legacy of hope for the entire community. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming and inspiring stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below with your views and let us know where you're watching from. Your support means the world to us.